and welcome to the Royal Beat Book Club with me, Kate Thornton. In this series, we pull back the pages and try to do the hard work for you, reviewing the best royal books in print so you know which truly deserves a place on your bookshelf. And today we're heading outdoors to talk about royal gardens, from the educational and scientific realms at Kew to the Castle of May's more personal and intimate feel. They're not just beautiful, but also places of world-class conservation. And here to get green-fingered with me, I'm delighted to be joined by the author of Royal Gardens of the World, Mark Lane, also head gardener at Hampton Court Palace and Kensington Palace, Graham Dillamore, and senior curator at Historic Royal Palaces, Joanna Marshner. Welcome one and all. I've already chewed your ears off because there are so many questions that I have, but let's use this, shall we, Mark, as a guide, because this is one of many books that you've written.
This is the first one, actually.
Yeah, but you've written another 2 this year, you've just told me.
Yeah.
Those green fingers are busy. But this was your first book. Now that you've started, it seems that you can't stop.
No.
And I understand why, because this book took you to 21 celebrated gardens, all royal gardens, around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky to select 21. Because there are so many around the world.
And these are gardens belong to royalty in many different territories, not just our royal family here in the UK.
Absolutely. So it's the UK, it's Europe, it's the Far East, it's across to India. So I wanted it to sort of be a really broad spectrum, and I also wanted to sort of make people think that it's not just a royal garden, it's something that belongs to a palace.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of interpretation, so like the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew,
yeah.
Or there's the Taj Mahal, which is obviously a mausoleum over in India, but it's still a royal garden at the end of the day. So it was trying to sort of redefine that royal garden and also to look at royal gardens as an art form, because they are.
There are so many things, as are so many royal estates, actually. What we come to understand through the pages of your books is that they're more than just a feast on the eye. They serve great scientific purposes, great conservation purposes. And we know that our royal family are passionate about their gardens, from our monarchy today to the kings and queens of the past. And the late Prince Philip probably summed it up quite nicely by saying that they are in a constant state of change. And you'll know that better than anyone, Graham, because man and boy, or boy and man rather, you have been serving the royal gardens of here in the UK. I was 16 when you joined you joined up.
Yeah, that's right. It seems a long time ago. 1980, August 1980, so almost 44, just over 44 years ago, I started as a young garden apprentice in Kensington Gardens, and worked through the royal parks and the royal household, and now to my organisation now, Historic Royal Palaces. And here I find myself at Hampton Court Palace. So I've had a lovely career, and I'm very lucky.
Haven't you just? I mean, this is your office. Or one of
one of my offices. Yeah, I could spend all day, all week in a garden, as I'm sure many gardeners could. This is where I suppose I'm most comfortable, where I'm most at home, and a place that I've seen develop over many years. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about being a gardener is you get to watch that movement in time and that progress as gardens develop and mature.
Well, you've got the constant change of the seasons, but beyond that, you've also got the story that it tells about our history. When you're talking about working and overseeing the gardens at Hampton, you know, this peels back through decades, centuries, years and years of royal history that can be seen in the flower beds there and the walls. I mean, if those garden walls could speak,
yeah, yeah, that's right. And all gardens are different. You know, all gardens are different. But I always find that it's the connections and the encounters that they've had with the past and the personalities from the past that make gardens even more fascinating and lovely. So I'm very lucky to look after Kensington and Hampton Court, which has a real rich depth of history and garden heritage. So I'm blessed.
Yeah, I mean, Henry VIII is the man that we most relate to Hampton, and that kind of splendour that he insisted upon wherever he went. What do you think life would have been like in your role under him?
Yeah, difficult.
Yeah, try being married to him.
Yeah. And whether I'd have made it 44 years, highly unlikely.
Kept your head, who knows?
Yeah. Difficult times indeed. Unfortunately, we don't really know too much detail about Henry's gardens. We know their layout, They were relatively small at Hampton Court, but we don't really know much of the plant content or the detail of the garden, so it's that little bit of information we'd love to find one day.
So, Joanna, maybe you can tell me this. Where did the origins of the Royal Garden begin, and what was their initial purpose, as far as we know?
First of all, they were green solace, which sat just outside their rooms.
So a place to escape.
They were a place to escape. They were a place for relaxation. They were a place for women and children, which could be very difficult in so many ways in times past. And
with respect to what do you mean?
Well, just being out and about as a royal person could be very dangerous. So many of the royal houses actually had a sort of protected sphere, a garden in immediate proximity to a royal house, and then perhaps a park beyond. And the park beyond, of course, was also used for hunting, but it also created that sort of cordon sanitaire around a royal palace, and just allowed that little bit of kind of sort of protection in times where, there were, nation against nation and state against state and city against city. A powerful person found themselves in a dangerous position very often.
So I'd never thought of them as a place of sanctuary in terms of like safety. Obviously, we all love to get out to the garden. But what did you learn when you put this book together about the history and the connection between the outdoors and royal palaces and their gardens?
I think it's an interesting one, but I think what I found fascinating was the fact that behind a lot of the gardens, it was very, very strong women who were really who really knew what they wanted. And it was always about trying to outdo other people. I mean, it was always about that. So it was throwing money at it and all this stuff.
Really?
But it was also about, of course, the changing tastes and the fashions of both the monarchy as well as just generally taste and fashions changing. But there was very much that need, and I suppose that was sort of seen through, especially like the privy gardens or the private gardens, was those sort of spaces where they could just go out there and just get away from the hustle and bustle of court and just be surrounded by nature. And I know we talk about that now in this day and age, but they really knew the importance of greenery and flowers and nice scents and all that sort of stuff, how important that was to actually recharge your batteries so you can then go on and do the rest of your job as the monarch.
What did you find out through putting this book together and also going through your work for the royals in terms of who the great champions have been across the years when it comes to the great outdoors?
I mean, there was obviously William and Mary at Hampton, and then obviously they were also sort of associated with Het Loo Palace in the Netherlands, because that's where they came from. Maria Theresa, who actually married Louis XIV, was incredible because she actually became a dowager sort of leader for about 40 years, and she actually instigated changes at both Prague Castle as well as Chambord and also at Versailles. So
wow.
I know, see, and these are people you don't always sort of hear about, and you sort of think, why don't we hear more about this? This is something that's really important, and it's that sort of crossover, I think, between the different gardens, and knowing that people were doing the grand tours, or they were off visiting, Joe and Josephine Bloggs to go and see the best garden or the best sort of dress or the best, whatever it might be, the best flower, for example.
I guess also these were people that were our most travelled, or the only people that would travel in society, who were enabled to bring things back from their travels, to literally bed them in here. Was that your experience as you peeled back through the years?
Yeah, most definitely. And as Mark says, William III is an incredibly important figure in our gardens history and our heritage of this country. It was William III really that brought the Anglo-Dutch garden to life in the UK. And we're very thankful for the work that he did in doing that. He also was an instigator in bringing plants from across the seas, because through the Dutch East India Dock Company, he enabled plants to be collected relatively cheaply from all across the globe. And Hampton Court was one of their first places that they arrived. It was their destination for the collection of Mary, William's wife, and her exotic plant collection.
There you go. Men have been giving women flowers for as long as time began. Is that where the tulip originated? I mean, we see these tulips here now.
Oh, yes, they're lovely, aren't they?
Yeah,
well, it's part of that story as well. I mean, tulips were around before that time anyway, but William
here in the
strengthens
UK?
that. Yeah, William strengthens that collection 1,000 tulip bulbs arrived from Holland to Hampton Court at the end of the 17th century. And you can imagine a tulip bulb in those days was the price of a building, a small house. So incredibly expensive. So to buy 1,000 bulbs, to have them imported to Hampton Court.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Tulipomania, wasn't it?
So, like the Tudors used to kind of flaunt their wealth with jewels and pearls and diamonds. The Gardens really also told their own story of great opulence and look at what I've got.
Yeah, they were great examples of the power as well. And also that control over nature, that mustn't be forgotten at the end of the 17th century. Not only can I control, as the king, everyone around me, but I'm now can control nature. And I can clip plants to shape, and I can make them grow how I want them to grow.
The book really illustrates that. And we were flicking through some of the images that you've selected earlier, Mark, and you commented on this is man versus nature.
Yeah.
Those mazes.
Yeah.
The maze was quite an ostentatious kind of badge of, well, wealth, wasn't it? I mean, look at some of these.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it was also about, fun and game as well.
Yeah, that's true.
They really loved. But it was also about, overpowering nature to actually sort of show that, as Graham said, to just show that you can actually beat nature.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work.
You'll know, because this is your patch, so to speak. A maze like this, how do you upkeep it, and what level of work goes into it?
Yeah, it's not easy. We've got to start very early in the morning. We give it generally 2 clips a year. We start around 6 in the morning, but we've got to be finished by 10 because that's when it's open to the public.
Yeah. Most of these gardens are available and accessible, and that was really important to you, wasn't it?
It was a real key point, because I wanted people to read the book and think, yes, I can go and visit that place. Yes, of course, there are private parts within some of the palaces and gardens, but that was the main thing. I wanted people to be able to think, I can go off and I can go down and promenade down all those wonderful alleys like they used to do, or sail along the waters, or even just get lost in a maze like they used to do as well. And that was really important.
Of all the gardens that you've worked on and you've observed and you've studied, which are the ones that you think have stood the greatest test of time in terms of the environmental changes that we've seen and the tastes and the trends of the day?
For me, it's Kew. Kew is a garden. Indeed, it's a garden which is a product of 2 royal women rather than men.
Is it? Is it really? Oh, who are they?
The first really important royal gardener is Queen Caroline of Ansbach, and she is the wife of King George II. And she arrives as with her husband as Prince and Princess of Wales in London in 1714 after the Hanoverian succession, a desperately tricky political change of royal dynasty.
Change of guard, quite literally.
Quite literally a change of guard. And sadly, almost immediately, George II falls out with his dad, King George I, and is exiled from St James's Palace, which they were using as their headquarters, and is very quickly rents a house in Leicester Square, but decides, given that they've got a little family, that they need a house outside the hustle bustle of central London.
They're living in Leicester Square.
They're living in Leicester Square.
We think about that now. It's literally, you look this way, you've got Piccadilly Circus.
Yep.
You look that way, you've got Soho. These are not green leafy spaces. Even back then, I would imagine. Or maybe
No. It was very definitely, kind of dirty, noisy, busy central.
So they looked where?
Westminster. It was on the north side, so it's where the big cinemas are just now. The house is long gone.
Right.
But they decide that this just isn't going to work for them, and they take over the lease of a house in Richmond, which was called Richmond Lodge, and it was a kind of courtier house, not very big, a bit irregular, and a bit not ever so convenient, but it was within what had been a former park for Henry VIII's Richmond Palace. Right. The palace itself was long gone, but the grounds there and just a few buildings remained. And they took this on, and it had the beginnings of a garden, but it was just avenues down to the Thames, a little
Sounds
terrace.
quite nice.
Yes,
I'll give you that.
Terrace along the river. But Caroline had much bigger ambitions for that place.
Let's just, understand the importance of Kew and what it's gone on to become. So it's a World Heritage Site.
Now it's a World Heritage Site, and it's been a World Heritage Site since 2003. And many of the buildings that survive within the garden, both from that early 18th century history right through to the 19th century and then the 20th century, are listed. They are very important in a kind of host of ways.
I mean, this is cute. I mean, this is
the palm house.
This is a really fancy greenhouse, right?
A fancy greenhouse.
Really fancy greenhouse.
Yeah.
But this, it's according to UNESCO, it's been awarded World Heritage Site status because of its contribution to the study of plant diversity, plant economy and botany. So it's that what you're looking at there is it looks like a greenhouse, but actually it's a massive lab, isn't it?
This is a massive lab. And again, this is something that starts again in the 18th century. Caroline's daughter-in-law, who was called Princess Augusta, takes on then the kind of garden when Queen Caroline dies. She dies in 1737. And Augusta and her husband, and then Augusta alone when her husband dies, takes on the garden from that point. They had already, in fact, bought a house on the next door estate. So you can imagine you have Queen Caroline's house and garden, and then you have Augusta in just next door.
So really what you've got is all the work that she began over here, all the visions that she had, the fact that she was quite a disruptor in terms of her thinking, that blend of old and new, and then you get and Augusta come along and she's like, well, hang on, what can we do with this?
What can we do with this? Yeah. And this then becomes a much more botanical garden. This becomes a garden of the world. Yeah. And this is where things like the pagoda that people may now so enjoy visiting when they visit Kew Gardens. But the pagoda at one stage was one of just a whole series of buildings from around the world. There was an Alhambra, and there was a mosque, and there was a Chinese bridge, and there was a Temple of Confucius. And so as visitors went round, not only could they then see new plants coming from different parts of the world through trade, and the fact then that the royal family would pay to put a botanist on a ship to then be the plant hunter to bring back things to these precious royal gardens. But
plant hunter, that's a good job, isn't it?
Good job.
Global plant hunter. But do you know what you understand now when you look at things like, for example, with Victoria and Albert and the Great Exhibition. So many of his ideas, I mean, he was considered visionary for his curation of great inventions from across the globe that were housed in a not dissimilar fashion. But actually, she was way ahead of him on this, right?
She was way ahead of them on this, and indeed had. At that stage, greenhouses were called hot houses or stoves, but was growing, sort of trying to get plants coming in from South Africa and plants coming in from China to germinate here, and trials and the leading gardeners of the age beginning to be associated with this royal garden.
But you need, for somebody with her vision and her passion, you need somebody that's going to bring that to life. And in modern day, that would be you guys. But back in the days, Sir Joseph Banks, I mean, he was transformative in terms of bringing that vision to the life that we understand it to be now in terms of what lives under there.
Yes, exactly. So Joseph Banks is really important. And in fact, he becomes the gardener then of Augusta's daughter-in-law, Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. She was the wife of George III. And George III and Charlotte, they were terribly, terribly keen gardeners. And indeed, they were, in that generation, the two gardens, the Richmond Lodge Garden and Augusta's Garden, were put together, and that makes the site that we now visit as Kew Gardens.
I have been so many times, and now I want to go back tomorrow and look at it through these eyes, because you've given me an understanding of it that's way beyond anything I had. Talk to me about the beehive there, because there's not many beehives that stand at 56 feet tall.
I know, it's an incredible piece of sculpture. It works by, there's a natural beehive which is very close to it, and when the bees sort of move around, you've got lights that are all inside there, and then there's like a vocal and a cello accompaniment, and the lights and the music change in accordance to how the bees actually move.
Wow.
And it's one of the most...
So it's not just good looking, it's got good purpose.
It has real good purpose, but it's really incredibly magical, I think, when you stand in there and you listen and you watch, especially if you do it at night time. I think it's just really, really amazing. And then, of course, you're still surrounded by all the greenery and everything around what the queue is. So you sort of get this fully immersive experience. And that's what, gardens should be like. They should be like that. But then again, it sort of shows you how gardens change over the years. So, sculpture has always been part of a garden. This is, a lovely modern contemporary piece of sculpture.
With a purpose.
With a purpose.
It's functioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it puts the pagoda in the shade, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, our current monarch is most definitely green-fingered. That much we do know, from his passion for sustainability to his love of planting trees. King Charles plays a present and very hands-on role across his many royal gardens. But he has a particularly special relationship, I think it could be said, with Highgrove. And, why do you think that is? Is it because he built it from the ground up?
Yeah, predominantly. It's one of these wonderful, magical sort of spaces where his organic sustainability, his rich biodiversity, his knowledge of plants and how the plants go together, but also the whole ecosystem and how all of that works, has been put in this one particular spot. And I think it's just remarkable that, you can go around there and it still feels like a very personal garden. Yes, it's quite large, but there are so many lovely sort of smaller spots.
So layered.
Exactly, that you can just think, I could do that at home.
Yeah.
And that's what's so wonderful about it. And that's why it is so inspirational. And it's just his incredible love for gardening that just shines through. You just, wherever you look, look at this. Wherever you look, that's the sundial garden. It's absolutely
all the
beautiful.
wild meadows.
Yep, wild meadows, his
beautiful.
arboretum. He's, as he said, as he gets older, all he ever wants to do is plant trees.
And we've seen him in the same gardening jacket for about 40 years, haven't we? He's got a pocket hanging off.
Exactly. But he's a true gardener.
You do get a sense that once he walks through those doors, he pulls off the robes of royal duty and on goes the gardening gear and out he goes. His knowledge, his passion, is that tangible in the exchanges that you've had with him?
As Mark says, it's a fantastic garden. I think the way that it blends into the countryside and that part of the world, and that it just fits in, it's a very relaxed garden, it's timeless in a way that you can move through it without a care in the world. It's a very relaxing space.
What did it look like when he took ownership of Highgrove? Because there wasn't much there, as I understand.
There were a few buildings and a few features. It was a relatively formal layout, but we're relatively close and wrapped around the house. And I think what the King has done is remarkable in how he's pushed and blended the garden out into the estate almost seamlessly in a way, and it's a lovely combination of new and also some harks back to the past as well.
Yeah. And it's still considered to be a relatively young garden, certainly in comparison to some of the ones that you're overseeing. Yeah, it's the first time I don't often hear that phrase, a young garden. I'm never quite sure what it means, whether it's 20th century or it's a garden currently in ownership of the same generation. I would probably say it would be a young garden, but I wouldn't judge it on that.
No.
A lot of the planting that's gone into Highgrove is very much with sustainability and the environment in mind, and he's a big driver of that. A great educator, actually, and was mocked for many a year.
He was.
And look who's laughing now, hey?
I know, absolutely. Everything now is about sustainability and biodiversity, and the King knew way back in sort of the 70s, 80s that that's exactly what needed to be done. And he uses the term short-termism because he believed that people would just, putting pesticides and herbicides
Yeah.
onto the land with no regard whatsoever. And he just wanted to make this sort of pocket, this garden, to actually show people that you can make a difference, and it's going to attract wildlife, it's going to attract pollinators. Even the things like the stumpery that he created,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, his father was bemused by this. When
know,
Prince
I
Philip
know,
arrives at
yeah.
the house, he's like, "What are you going to set fire to this lot?"
But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful.
really brilliant.
It's a wonderful feature because obviously, again, you know, the king understands that that wood is eventually going to rot down, and that carbon is going to go back into the soil, and it's going to feed the plants. And also, you know, that each sort of little niche and little corner that you actually create is going to be specific. You know, there'll be a specific plant that will grow in those particular situations. And that's where his knowledge and skill comes through. And you've also got to remember, you know, historically, you know, kings and queens had very good education most of the time, and they would also go off and visit places.
Yeah.
So this knowledge always had built up. And the king, I mean, he knew what he wanted and he went for it, and this is the result, which is an incredible garden.
Climate change has got to be a challenge when you're overseeing gardens anywhere in the world right now. Yeah. What are the challenges that you come up against?
Well, it's right at the core of our thinking. I think every gardener at the moment is right at the core of where they're thinking, along with sustainability and the loss of species, whether it be insect or bird. Those are right at the centre of all our thinking, everything we do now and everything we're going to do going forward.
Yeah.
So I think every gardener is generally on the same agenda.
Yeah.
And we're looking for ways forward.
You're preserving beds and flowers and trees and plants that have stories to tell. It's really important that you hold on to them.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think for us historic garden managers, historic head gardeners, it's really difficult for us because we're trying to preserve and conserve those wonderful historic features that are really important and everyone wants to come and see. But at the same time, we've got this climate change cloud over us, and we're having to adapt, and we're having to make adjustments to what we do, but we're trying to hang on to all those lovely things as well.
And constantly educate yourself.
Constantly educating ourselves. It seems to be fast moving these days, and as an old gardener who's been doing it for a while, it just seems to have picked up pace over the past 5, 10, 15 years, and it all seems to be approaching us rather quickly. So there's quite a fast-paced movement now. So every year, every few months even, there's something new to read. There's more information coming forward, and it's as gardeners, there's this phrase that says, as gardeners, we've been in the front row of this. We've had the best seat in the house of this from climate change because we've seen this coming. I've seen this coming for many, many years as a gardener, and I'm sure every gardener will tell you the same thing. To see my gardeners working in the garden in shorts in January just ain't right. And to see things blooming out of season and to drive through the countryside and not have one insect hit your windscreen is worrying. So there's something going on, and people can see that in their own small back garden, or they can see it in their really big garden. But it's time for us to really start thinking about this seriously, I think.
Well, and you just gave a brilliant example there of Charles with the stumpery and explaining to his father, who was a very educated conservationist, passionate, world-beating in many respects, explaining to him, no, this is why I'm doing this. This is what the stumperies are here for. They're not here to look good. They have purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can also see that through, historically in the gardens as well. When they created things like bosquets, these copses that they put together, it was there for shelter. It was there to keep cool. A lot of the time these gardens are very large, and you've got these very long avenues. Not always a lot of tree overhead. So being able to create these copses where people could go and be sheltered from was really important. So people sort of understood about heat and they understood about rainfall and all that back then. But now, as Graham said, it's galloping. It really is galloping.
Gathering a pace.
And it's trying to. I mean, I know when I went round and talking to a lot of the gardeners, they're now having to introduce similar looking plants that give the same effect, but obviously are more drought tolerant. Now, could you say, is that real conservation, or is that preserving it, or are they changing the feel and look of the garden because they're introducing a new type of plant?
Kind of the answer is all of that.
Exactly, it is, and it's a very tricky balance. It's a very tricky balance.
Let's talk about different growing environments. Another garden that has a very personal and special feel is the Castle of May, which is often referred to as the Queen Mother's Garden. And in 1952, she stumbled upon it shortly after her husband, King George VI, had passed away. What do we know about the story that sits behind her love of the gardens?
Well, I mean, first of all, the position of this. So this is right up in the north of Scotland. It overlooks the Orkney Islands, as you can see. It's only about sort of 1,000 feet or 400 metres from the coastline.
Yeah, so I would imagine pretty salty and difficult
Exactly,
conditions.
rather difficult. And she was on a journey. She was visiting some friends who lived in Caithness, and she saw what she described as this sort of downtrodden sort of castle that sort of appeared to just grow out of the rock.
We should just, for our viewers around the world that are maybe not familiar with this part of the world, there are lots of castles in Scotland. Like, there's over 1,000.
Yeah.
So she would have seen many of these on her travels. What do you think was about this one that grabbed her?
It was the isolation. She really wanted to find a place that was going to be really peaceful and quiet and away from the busyness of London and court and everything else. So this sort of hit all of the, or ticked all the boxes, should I say. And there's a story, it's a lovely story that she said she went there was a rather old gentleman there, and he said that he would sell the place for the cost of the lead on the roof, which was about £100. And obviously there was no electricity, it needed a fair amount of work doing to it. So she eventually bought the property, or should I say the estates bought the property, and very quickly she got the internal sort of done, but at the same time focused on the garden as well.
And this is where the royals have the power to breathe new life into old buildings, old gardens, and they could do some very important work, can't they, Joanna?
The royal families and their gardens have had, you know, they are important in so many ways. You know, yes, for both introducing and protecting important species like geraniums or euphorbia or crinum, you know, plants that we may all grow just in our gardens at home, were ones that arrived into the royal gardens and then were dispersed from the royal gardens. So important scientific work on one side, but on the other side, it is simply making beautiful green spaces that people could enjoy.
Yeah. And we all know now the mental health benefits of getting outside. I mean, you've had it nailed. You must be the happiest chap in here.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I mean, it's well recorded, isn't it? Well documented, you know, how good gardens are for you. I always say you just can't have a negative thought in a garden. You know, I can't help but feel positive, uplifted. Yeah. Sense of timelessness in a garden. I don't worry about time. I just relax. So those healing powers are incredibly important. I was reminded with the Castle of May picture, that the other common feature in all of this is that great ability of our royal family to spot great potential in the garden. And I'm reminded of this story of when William and Mary came to Hampton Court when they first arrived in Britain, is that they found Hampton Court with a leaking roof, a dilapidated building with twists and turns and beams where they banged their heads, and a garden that was in a real mess. But they spotted it as an amazing potential for a grand palace.
And the same could be said of Charles with Highgrove, and we see the Queen Mother there, a passionate gardener. And actually what's lovely is, as we understand it from your book, that Charles chose every rose in that garden there.
In the rose garden.
In the rose garden.
There was a
in
new
remembrance
rose
of
garden.
her.
Exactly that. Because she did love her roses, and we see her here, and she's in the shell garden, where they use crushed shell and gravel for the pathways.
Oh, really?
And she, I think it was, I can't remember now, I think it was Albertine, which was one of the roses she actually really loved, that she grew there. But yeah, Prince Charles, because the Queen Mum used to go there throughout 3 weeks throughout August, and then again sort of back in October. And now the King, he still goes there, he still gets involved with it.
He might even be there. Well, he's been there in the last few weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he chose all the roses to commemorate his grandmother.
I mean, it's kind of a love letter, really, isn't it? In so many ways. And when we look at the work that sits between your pages, and we look at the work that sits under you and your team, you're artists. You know, what you're creating is is truly wonderful. And as the seasons change, just keep going back to those royal gardens because the picture keeps changing, but the beauty remains.
Yeah, they'll be there forever and ever and ever. And and every time you come back, even me, when I go back, I see something different.
Yeah, giving you a lot of pleasure, I can tell.
Yeah, I just have to pinch myself sometimes. It was a tough choice between me. I was doing this, and I was going to go and be a farmer when I was very, very young at 17.
Oh, wow.
It was either farming or horticulture. And my father said, I think farming might be better for you. But I kind of liked horticulture. I seemed to get naturally go to it. Yeah, what a good choice that was.
Can I ask all of you, actually, your favourite royal gardens?
Oh, goodness, that's so difficult.
Oh.
I think I've got many. I think not necessarily in the UK. I think Bombolì Gardens in Italy are spectacular. I love water in a garden and what can be done with water in a garden. I also love the Alhambra in Spain.
It's featured in your book. Yeah.
Which I think is incredibly special and also not just really not regarded high enough, I think, as a royal garden. But for me, I'm going to say Hampton Court.
I think you have to.
Yeah, I think that depth of history is just amazing. And every time I touch a wall or lean on a gate, I just can sort of feel that history come through me.
How lovely. Joanna, what about you?
And for me, it's a toss-up. In so many ways, I love the garden at Hetlo, which is a William and Mary garden in the Netherlands. It is the most beautiful, beautiful garden, recently beautifully restored with wonderful sort of archaeology sort of underpinning the restoration there. But by contrast, at the end of Kew Gardens, there is a tiny glade with Queen Charlotte's cottage, which in the spring is filled with bluebells. And it's where she kept her kangaroos. And I think that is just, you know, once you know, it's the most beautiful place.
Her kangaroos. Actual kangaroos.
Actual kangaroos.
Okie dokie. I mean, I didn't see that one coming. Beat that, Mark.
For me, I think actually it's Drottningholm in Sweden.
Oh.
It's meticulously kept. It's quite a simple garden when it comes to, when you see sort of, you know, there's not a lot of flowers, there's a lot of greenery.
I thought it was Hampton at first sight.
Yeah, you see, it's, you know, it's very confusing. But from a distance, it looks like it's on a red brick plinth, but it's not. It's the way it's been built. It's just an incredible space to be in. It's very calming, very relaxing. And for me, yeah, it's just because not a lot of people always think about sort of Sweden or Denmark as having sort of really good royal palaces and gardens. But for me, yeah, Drottningholm really stood out. But also the one in Bali, the water garden. I mean, you know, everyone loves water in a garden, and having a whole garden that is all water is a magical one to have.
Of the 21 featured gardens in your book, there's 2 that you haven't visited, and Bali's one of them.
Bali was one of them. I'm going to do it. I'm definitely going to do it.
I'd like to take you. Let's do a show from there.
Exactly. Why not?
We've got a deal.
Exactly. Good one.
I'll see you next week in Bali. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? What a fascinating show. I could have talked and talked and talked for hours. And what wonderful work you've had a chance to enjoy across all of these years. Thank you for all the pleasure that you've put back into the soil for us. Fascinating stuff. To read more about the incredible gardens featured in Mark's book, his book's out now wherever you get your books. It's called Royal Gardens of the World, and it's 21 celebrated gardens from Highgrove and Alhambra, which was mentioned there, to beyond. It's available now, and please do go out and make sure that it finds a place on your bookshelf or your coffee table or your greenhouse.